Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My name is Nayyar Dada. My job is to introduce three brilliant ladies. It's great pleasure to see that the LLF is being dominated by ladies. The programs are, the great ones are. And if Hillary Clinton didn't lose election, we would be having the world order drafted by the ladies. But it's a great pleasure to see that. And my job is to introduce these ladies. Hazel has come all the way from New York to attend this place. And it's about, she's going to speak about 55 Lawrence Road, this remarkable location on Lawrence Road in Lahore. That particular area of Lahore has been very important and very special. I know personally that behind Fazldeen's building, Khushwant Singh used to live, Amrita Pritam used to live. So that area is really quite remarkable in terms of important personalities that lived there. And she has great memories about the place. And I believe that architecture, like people have different temperaments and personalities, buildings also have a character, and they resonate actually by the, mostly the character of the users is also reflected into buildings. उर्दू की एक वर्स मुझे अब याद आती है कि एक याद है कि दामन दिल छोड़ती नहीं, एक बेल है कि चिमटी हुई है शजर के साथ. So शायरी में बहुत जिक्र आता है. मुस्तफ़ा ज़ैदी की भी एक नज़म जिसका एक मिसरा मुझे अभी याद आ रहा है कि अफसाना दर अफसाना थी मुड़ती हुई सीढ़ी. दूसरा फिक्रा मुझे भूल गया, सॉरी. अच्छा. So architecture can speak a lot and can have all kind of depths. And Hazel, the father, is very well-known name amongst old Lahorites, Dr. Selza, who practiced in Lahore. And her mother was also a doctor, Dr. Kate, and she is a psychologist herself, and studied in Australia, is that right?
In London and Australia.
In London and Australia. So, coming from a Jewish family and having such feelings for our city and our people is something very nice. The second lady, Shirin Pasha, is established in College of Arts. She established the Department of Media and Filmmaking and recently retired and moved to States, but she keeps on coming and going. And she is also an eminent painter, and she has held, she's a contemporary of Salima Hashmi and has had many prestigious exhibitions to her credit. She has made a lot of well-known documentaries. She has worked with the World Bank and United Nations as well. Third lady is Aliya. She's a writer. She's writing a novel. While researching and working on her writing work, she came across Hazel, and they were able to interact with each other, and it will be very useful to see what she is writing and how she is relating Hazel's participation in it. She's presently a teacher in Islamabad, and from here onward, I will leave it to Hazel to take up.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Naseer, for that elegant introduction. And are you sure we can't persuade you to stay?
No, I'll stay.
You're staying? Oh, see? That was easy. So I'm going to just launch straight into it because we have a lot of things to cover. And I hope this is the right level and the right distance. Please let me know. So we're calling this presentation 55 Lawrence Road, and it's a presentation that I have given it in one form or another in several places in the US and also in a couple of places in Berlin, in Germany. And when I gave it outside Lahore, which is the first time I'm giving it, calling it 55 Lawrence Road, I called it the Other Pakistan. And my rationale for that was that I think you'll agree that the image of Pakistan worldwide is not as one that we would all desire it to be. So I wanted to correct in my very small way. I wanted to say, yes, I know you all think I'm crazy to even visit Pakistan, but there is this other Pakistan, the one that I know, the one I was born in, and I was born in Lahore, and the one I grew up in, and the one that provided my family with refuge when we needed it most, when we were refugees from Hitler's Germany. So for that refuge, and for that it was a place where we were able eventually to heal from those wounds and also to thrive. And those of you who do know my parents or remember my parents' doctor, the two doctors Selzer, you'll know that they did their share of healing in this town. Thank you. I'd also like to think, I'm really terrible with names, so I think I may get this wrong. Is it Zina Rokri? Mrs. Rokri, you're in the audience, the current inhabitant and owner of 55 Lawrence Road, who is gracious enough to come.
She's present here.
Thank you very much. So with that, I'm going to begin, and this picture I came across on the internet. This, as far as I know, is the earliest known picture of 55 Lawrence Road. Am I in the way?
No.
Okay. I love this picture, and it was just somebody sent it to me from the internet. We don't know, you might know better what year this might have been. When it was clearly not yet lived in much, but we don't know what year that was. It was way before we ever got there. But I just have this is the house we're talking about, as it first was born. So the question always comes up when I say I was born in Lahore and I'm doing all this, it's like, why was I born in Lahore? These are the questions I'm going to be answering in my talk. Why was I born in Lahore? Why did I come back after being away for 40 years? And why did I come back again and then again and actually again this time? And why the other Pakistan, which I think is a question I've already answered. I'm going to have to answer the question, why was I born in Lahore? I will have to go through my family history, but I assure you it'll be very brief. But from what documentation I have, it began in late 19th century Europe, specifically in Poland and Germany. And these are my grandparents. These are my great-grandparents. They didn't speak German, they only spoke Yiddish. This is Chaya Spiegel, my great-grandmother, who died in 1926, and her husband Shimon, who died in 1916. These are my grandparents this is a sort of announcement of their wedding or engagement. It's in Germany, and that was from 1907. These are my mother's parents. So very briefly, my parents Herman Marcus Selzer, who was born in Poland in 1909. My mother, Kate Neumann, who was born in Puritz, Germany in 1910. They both studied medicine in Europe, in Germany, between 28 and 33, and then Hitler made it illegal for German Jews to study medicine, so they had to interrupt their studies, and the only places they could go to continue were either Denmark or Italy, and they chose Italy. But they actually went separately, they didn't even know each other. And then they got married, they met and married, they had to marry in Switzerland because it was very difficult for Jews to marry in Italy. And in 1937, they left Europe and they came to what was then British India. And then in 1991, my mother, and 2007, my father died, and they were both buried in Jerusalem. And you'll find out from me how they got there. So this is just a very quick picture of my parents as students, just before they got married. And these are pictures of my father's family. This is what they looked like, children of those days in the early 1900s. They were very poor, actually, my father's parents, and these clothes that they wore were borrowed from the photographer. It came with the. This is my mother. My mother's family. She was much more. They were much more affluent, and they actually owned these clothes. I don't have much to say for the clothes. I don't particularly care for them, by the way. But just thought I'd tell you. And these are my grandparents, my father's parents, his father, his mother, and her brother. And this was in Israel. This is where I come from. And this, for anybody in the audience, the language, as I said, was Yiddish. And this is a postcard that was sent from one of my father's relatives in 1912 to his relatives in New York. And it's a postcard written all in Yiddish. And it's a work of art, as an object. I love it, so I'm sharing it with you. So they left, as I said, in 1937, and they came to British India, both of them medical doctors. They established a practice in Lahore, and a couple of years later, they had 2 children, one of which was me, and one of which was my brother Michael. Then, 3 years later, they'd set up their practice in Lahore. 3 years later, in 1940, on the 5th of December, which happened to be my father's 31st birthday. That's the age they were. They were just 30-ish, my parents. There was a knock on the door, and the British police, had come to arrest our family because we were enemy aliens. My parents didn't have a passport. They'd come with Polish passports. Polish passports were revoked by Poland because they were not really Polish. They just happened to have been born there, or my father had happened to have been born there. And they said, well, you don't even speak Polish, you don't know how to make Polish food, you don't know Polish dances, you don't count. So they revoked the citizenship, leaving them stateless. And enemy aliens, basically undocumented as the refugees coming into America are today. So we were arrested when my brother was actually just 3 months old. And we were taken by train to this place called Puranda, which is near somewhere, I'm very bad with geography, you'll see. It's somewhere near in the Bombay area. And then from then, a couple of years later, we were taken to another internment camp, which was Satara. And so for a total of 5.5 years, having come to Lahore in 1937, and then in 1940, we were taken to these camps and released from the camps after the war in 1946. Does that
mean that you were there for 4.5 years?
5.5 years, 5.5 years, in the 2 camps. And so we'd left Lahore, and being stateless is something that you can read about, but most of us have not experienced it. I was too young to experience it, but the fact is that we came back to Lahore. That was the place to come back to.
The children were also arrested with the parents?
Yeah, my brother was 3 months old. I was 2 or whatever. Yeah. And I'll show you more pictures. So this is a picture of the camp. Must have been. I'm very bad with distinguishing these things.
Sitara, I think.
There's a Sitara? Yeah. Yes, probably was. I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know. It was one of them, one or the other. But this is just some of the people, inhabitants of the camp, and the barracks that we lived in, or ate in, or congregated in. And there's my family, my father with the beard, my mother, me and my brother, and these are just other inhabitants. Most of the people there were divided into either Germans, the Germans were either Nazis or anti-Nazis, and we were segregated accordingly. And we were obviously anti-Nazis, or Italians, and they were considered fascists, so they were in a separate group. But these were obviously the anti-Nazi Germans, the good Germans. Oh, I did this already, sorry. These are pictures of that, my brother and me these are pictures from the camp, me and my brother. So we were very young children. And this is a group of the children. You see, they are typically German-looking children, they're blonde. And again, one of the things I hope you'll take out of this talk is the fashions. So these are the children's fashions in those days. And this is, somebody sent me this from Germany recently, a picture of the kindergarten. So there were a lot of children, and that's where we went to school. So German was, in a sense, my first language, even though my parents never spoke German to us. They refused. And so this is, somebody identified me as Hazel Selzer. And this is another interesting object. This is my father. It says Parole Center, Puranda, British India. And he was trying to write to his brother in Israel, in Palestine. And it was censored, opened by the censor, and it was never received. That's why it's still in my father's possession, which is why I have it. This, I give you this picture because it's a family picture that was taken right after we were released from Lahore, from the camps. And I show it to you because it's a very sad picture. Maybe I only see that, but I'll point out to you what's sad about it is these two children, they don't look very happy or very thriving, so probably having difficulty breathing. My father had almost no expression. And my mother, she always smiled. As somebody said, as Shirin and Aliya said, women always have to do the smiling in these situations. And so then in 1946, just the year before partition, we were released. So our old address was Parole Center, Satara, and our new address was 55 Lawrence Road. And thereby hangs this tale. So we came back, my parents reestablished their medical practice, and then in 47 was the end of British Raj and the beginning of Pakistan. And my parents were now on the move from being refugees to being privileged outsiders, not insiders, but outsiders. So I grew up Jewish. I mean, I always knew I was Jewish. Everybody else knew I was Jewish. The nuns in the convents that we went to made quite sure that everybody knew we were Jewish because my parents wouldn't let us go to the scripture classes. So we got a 0 on our report cards for that. And if Hazel had gone to this class, her marks would have been better. So we went to a variety of schools, as I think many of you in this audience might understand. We went to nuns, priests, missionaries, because in the end we went to Woodstock School in Missouri. I don't know if people are aware of that school. And then we went to school in England. And all the time we were changing identities and accents. It had to go from sort of a Lahore accent to an American accent in this American school, and then to a British accent. And so people, when they say, where are you from? That's why I hate the question. So this is 55 Lawrence Road. This is pictures that we took when we first came to the house. And what I've left out so far is that Begum Shahnawaz, I don't know if her son Zahur is in the audience. He said he would try and come. No? No. He said he would try and come. Her grandson. She arranged for us to be in this house. And that's a long story, because it was partly because my father was able to treat her son for a very serious leg ailment. So she got us into this house where we stayed. This is another picture of the house, and this one. And so it was the bougainvillea and the sort of terracotta unpainted. This is a rose garden.
Mother planted.
My mother was a major gardener. Is that what you mean? This was actually the the side, but she had rose gardens everywhere. She had made one of her rose gardens was designed as a Persian carpet. Somehow she had this conceit. This was a beautiful. This was coming into Lawrence Road, and this is my parents when they re-establishing them. This is in 1950. This is 4 or 5 years after we came out of the camp. And this is another picture of my mother and our 2 children, and I think you can see the difference. There's just a bit more joy and spirit in this one than the earlier one. And this is us these are just other pictures on the lawns of 55 Lawrence Road. My brother and me with our Ayah Rosie. This is my father with us and our dog Jumbo. This is Dr. Iqbal, my parents' partner, had given us these clothes for Eid. And again, this is a family. And then because we were so separated from our from our larger family, they were all in Israel. We'd never been outside the country. These became our family, is the workers, my parents' workers and employees. They were our family. These are all of them on the steps of 55 Lawrence Road.
I think you managed to contact them recently.
Recently, yeah. One of the one who had become actually my father's. She trained him to be a laboratory assistant, and he had unfortunately died. But Dr. Iqbal. So in 1961, the practice had grown, and it was time to leave 55 Lawrence Road. So we moved to 13 Goldberg 5. I don't know if any of you know that house. I'll show you a picture of that. And he became their partner, and my mother expanded the laboratory work that she was doing. So this is that house that we moved into. And my mother, it was very manicured, as you can see. And I was, cineraria, and again, my mother's borders and gardens, and that's her in the back of this new house. And this is the last picture, actually, that there ever was of all of my family. This is me, my brother, my parents, and my son, Danny. We were all having coffee after lunch. And my children have been part of Lahore in a smaller way. This is my daughter with people who worked for my parents at 13 Goldberg 5. They had a birthday party with a bandarwala. I don't know if they're still alive or they're good. Well, may they prosper. And again, to say how much my parents had become part of the scene in Lahore, they were invited to high places to meet the Queen, to meet the governor of West Pakistan, the Governor General, just to point out that they had become part of society. They belonged to high places. They had a very large medical practice that extended throughout the region. My father would go up to places as far as Chitral and Kafistan and Pasha, all those places to visit patients. But then everything changed. The war in the Middle East, which I don't know how much you all have followed those things, but was in the early 70s. And suddenly, the people who'd been respected doctors, my parents, they were now viewed with suspicion. And it became time to move again. They could no longer live in Lahore. It became impossible. I don't think it's important for me right now to go into detail on that. But for them, it was like, what next? Too many times they'd fled, too many times they'd had to start again, being a refugee and being reminded of being Jewish. Because till now, nobody in Lahore, everybody knew we were Jewish, but we were considered people of the book. We were of the Abrahamic faith, and it just wasn't relevant till it became political. And they were very hurt by this change in the scene. And the plans that they'd had for retiring in Pakistan and developing a mobile clinic to provide medical services throughout the northern areas. So the idea that was gone, and the idea of growing old in Lahore was not happening. And so they didn't know, at first they thought they'd go and live in England, but when they got to England, they said, why are we here? What on earth are we here for? So this is one of the last pictures of my parents. This was taken on their 50th wedding anniversary. We gave them a surprise party in Brooklyn. My mother died 6 years later, and my father 20 years later. But it's just a nice picture. And so they had led this life where they'd had so many nationalities. They started out in Poland, this lower half here, and then from then they actually they started German, my mother German, my father Polish. Then they got Pakistani passports, and then when they moved out of Pakistan, they got Israeli passports. I've always had a British passport because I was born in British India. And these were travel papers my parents had to use because they didn't have passports. They were every country had to agree that you would leave after 10 days. They wouldn't give you more than 10 days. And there were these big, long pieces of paper. And so my parents died in Jerusalem, and these are their gravestones. So for me, after all this time, what did I do? I left, and our family was never under the same roof again. So in 2007, after my father had died, I started to really obsess about 55 Lawrence Road. Everything had changed. There was nobody who knew Lahore anymore, and me in context of Lahore. So I had this, what I've found out since, is a universal longing to remember, to go back to a place that meant something to you as you were growing up. And for me, that place was 55 Lawrence Road. You may all have your own place like that. And certainly there are many stories of partition, of people wanting to come back and see their house or their shop or whatever it was. And certainly the Palestinians, with the right of return, they want to come back to where they came from. And for me, it became an issue. I've got to find 55 Lawrence Road, and I've got to find if that building, the one that I first showed you, is that still alive? So Lahore was really beckoning to me in a serious way. So in 2011, I decided I would actually start making plans. But I became extremely anxious, of sort of great angst. First of all, would they even give me a visa? Would the Pakistanis give me a visa? And what if the house was no longer there? What would I do? And what if nobody recognized me? And what if I was this undesirable enemy alien again? And what if they just rejected me, as they'd rejected my parents in the end? So I had to find the house, and above all, I had to find the bedroom that I'd grown up in. And I did. I came back in 2011, and the house was there. Much altered, but it was there, 55 Lawrence Road. Thank you, Mrs. Wilfrey. But this is what it looks like now. It was white instead of the colors that I remembered. And many things had changed. They'd built another story. They'd closed a lot of the verandas. 40 years is a long time. But it was there. And I can't even begin to tell you how relieved I was. So again, these are what it was like then, and this is what it was like now. Now, this is the test. Will this work?
So all these years, this is the room I was thinking about. I don't expect anybody else to understand what I'm talking about, because obviously this room is in a state of disrepair or reconstruction or whatever. And my skylights are no longer here, they're hidden because they've lowered the ceiling. But it's this room that I kept thinking about for all these years, because this was my bedroom. And this bedroom was what I thought about when I was at boarding school. This was the place I wanted to come back to. This room had my bed, it had a particular matching bedspread and curtains. This room, through that door, I could see outside to the garden. This was the place, in the whole world that I felt the most, not only safe, because it was my home, it was my parents' house, but comfortable. This is the place where everything was the way I wanted it to be. And I knew it was waiting for me when I was away. This is where I wanted to come back to. So it was a kind of a compulsion. I felt compelled. I must come back to Lahore, see Lawrence Road, see the house, but really it was this room that I wanted to, that I felt compelled to come back and see. It's just about this room. And even though there's nothing in this room that was like it was then, I can still, in my mind's eye, see the room. And that I was at 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 years old, 15 maybe.
Thank you to Shireen. Shireen was the filmmaker on this. She went back with me, or took me back, or she and Rashida Kazim. And we have lots more footage, but not, you won't be seeing it here. So I found the house, I found the bedroom. Oh. Okay. But I also went back and found the other house, 13 Gulberg 5, and now owned by Raza Kazim. And so the house that we'd lived in went from being a place of medicine and healing to this most wonderful Sanjay Nagar Institute of Philosophy and Art. I don't know if anybody from 13 Gulberg 5 is here. I'd hope there would be. And Raza Kazim, when I said I wanted to come, he said, "This is not my house, it's your house," in true Lahori fashion. So I found when I came back that time is that our family is part of Lahore's history. It's not just that Lahore is part of our history. And so then I had many reasons to return again in 2012, 2013, and now 2020, because I always said I'm not coming back unless I have a project. And Aliya provided the project, which she will talk in a minute. So thank you to all the people who made this project possible, and your name is emblazoned on my screen there. Thank you all very much.
Quite a story. But to me, it's like a film. I make films, and this is absolutely the kind of things we are looking for, you know, to be able to get depth and history and details. So a big welcome to Hazel to come back. Really, things I felt when I heard that she was coming back, that things maybe happen in circles, and this was really coming back. And since I knew her history, I had realized what all her father had done with the theater of Second World War. I mean, here is this one Dr. Selzer, young, just recently married, looking for a house, and look at the continents that he came, all the way to this continent looking for a home. And he said something like, "I'm looking for somewhere I can hang my hat on." So those kind of details, you know, I knew that her family had. So when I heard her coming back this time and we were talking on the phone, I said, "Hazel, I think this circle is going to get completed, but now you are invited. So now you are closing the circle and you will be invited to Lahore." Incidentally, I found something very interesting I was visiting Hazel in her Long Island house, and in the basement she has cartons and cartons of things that her father, Dr. Selzer, had saved. So I think all the things that she's shown is part of this amazing collection that she has. And out of that, I said, I want to see where he wrote what he did of Lahore when he came. And surprisingly, out of all those cartons, she pulled out the bit of writing that I thought I would like to. And I reminded her if I can read it right now, so I will. he's saying, now this is his words, I traveled straight across the northern part of India from Calcutta to Delhi. I stopped for a day or two, at times 3, at Banaras, Lucknow, Allahabad, Agra, New Delhi. I was in a rush. I was in a hurry. I wanted to come to a final conclusion and decision. I did not have the patience, nor did I want to spend the time to see the unique attractions of the places I passed. Thus, I did not visit the ghats of Banaras, nor the Taj Mahal near Agra. Next morning, I was sitting in a second-class compartment of the Frontier Mail. 24 hours later, I arrived in Lahore. I had a Tonga bring me to the Falatis Hotel, the only acceptable hotel in town. I had learned not to select a hotel which was not kosher in the eyes of the Sahib population, which was Falatis. Falatis was a long, one-storied structure with 2 wings of large, high rooms, enormous bathrooms, and dusty cotton carpets. Coming from Bombay, Lahore appeared to me as a primitive but dignified town. The roads were kept clean by an army of road sweepers, and the wide streets of the modern, as well as the large public parks and many, many gardens. Every bungalow had its own garden, and its gardeners were all working all the year round in competition with each other, which gave Lahore an amazing impression of being a town characterized by largeness and openness. I think that first day in Lahore, I had already decided that we were going to live there. 2 problems were facing me to make sure that Lahore would suit my wife Kate and me from a professional point of view, and to find a bungalow suitable for residences and practice. I'm adding, and with a large garden. So 55 Lawrence Road did exactly that. In fact, it was the only home to hang the hat on and that the Selzers had. So this really is an amazing, but I think, what is it in Lahore that, attracts people? You hear, जिन्हें लाहौर नहीं देखा उन्हें वो पैदा ही नहीं होया, लाहौर नहीं देखा तो कुछ नहीं होया. So, we all know it. We know from the early travelers of the last 2,000 years of the history of Lahore that Lahore was a special place. But beyond this, you want to know a little bit more. So, in the last years as a filmmaker, I don't live in Pakistan that much anymore, but whenever I come back, I want to do some interviews of some people that I have found that particular year. And this year, the year that Hazel came in 2011, was the year I thought I had found one personality who had a real story to tell about what Lahore really is. It is amazing, just bewildering and amazing the way everything was happening. And in the background, there is this huge war which is happening, and coming through the Suez in a steamboat, coming to Bombay, and everybody saying, don't go there, don't go there, don't go there, and Lahore is saying, come. So I thought that was a very beautiful way that I had found a story out of many. I'm gathering them on every trip. I try to look for people, and I have about 6 other people along with Hazel, so that we can recreate what Lahore was, at least in the 40s. My preference is only, I love people who are 10 years at least older than me. I respect their memories. I just love them, and I would rather, be sitting cozily with them, listening to their stories and things. So I hope that my own repertoire of filmmaking with personalities, I'll be able to get together things of 1940s, in which Lahore was a metropolitan, cosmopolitan center. And it was full of religious places right next to each other. For instance, I was just going to count the churches in Lahore, and I began by the Naulakha church next to the railway station, and I ended up by another small church in Anarkali, and there were 17 churches between that. It's not even half a mile. And the other day, I was talking to Aliya. Aliya's son, and he's a sociologist, and he's right there.
Adil.
And we were, something came up in my discussion with him that there are mosques, because mosques have to be a place. It has to be a space where people congregate. That's the whole idea. The church, you know, along with that, there is a congregation. But for Sikhs and Hindus, you need a little space in your house. Maybe even a friend of mine who was in Montreal had a cupboard, and she would open the door and there was a mandir that she had made inside. So maybe now we have just started to think that maybe Lahore doesn't have so much of those things, or maybe they are now erased, unfortunately, because they existed side by side. So that is the best part of my putting together all these things, is that how insular Lahore was, how patient it was, how much it beckoned to people, and all these things didn't really. The tolerance level was amazing, amazing. So that is one.
Yeah, I think so.
There's,
Yeah, Pindi mein.
But I was also researching for something in a lot of libraries abroad, including India House Library and the Toronto Library, the Kahan Library, and I found that Lahore was, it was not my subject of research, but it happened that Lahore was being mentioned in very peculiar ways, very good ways, which nobody knew, and very small kind of examples, like Noor Jahan chose Lahore when she was asked, where do you want to be sent by Shah Jahan? And when she spent her 20 years in Lahore, she did amazing things in fashion, and she ordered a white carpet when nobody had ever had a white carpet made, and it was included in the recent exhibition of the best carpets of the world, that carpet. And the catalog had 60% of the carpets made in Lahore. So Lahore, I found in my researches, was really a very special city. To me, it seemed that the best part that I found was that it was a city of debates. I think it's pertinent to, in a literary context, to talk about the fact that debates were held, particularly the trend began during Akbar. So it's really ancient, like 16th century. There were debates, and there were a whole lot of barandaris, almost it seems like in a string. It needs to be researched further, but from what my readings were, that, and they existed somewhere where the British now needed land to make their railway lines. It's a lot of area. If only from the sky, when you look down into the railway lanes around the station, you'll realize that it's a huge part of Lahore that is undertaken. So in that part, there were a string of barandaris where the debates would be held during Akbar's time. And those debates, length of time, if they could not resolve what the debate was about, would extend to 3 months. That's the amount of time that a debate could go on. And
3 months.
3 months.
Oh,
3
because
months.
I thought we don't want.
No.
Yeah.
I want Aliya to be.
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
know the story.
No, I know
We
my
have
time
time.
is little, because, but the point is that we are not just talking of Lahore like it was in the 40s. It had deeper roots, and there is a lot of history. I'm sure all history students would love to go through it, or sometimes. So, so that is my entrance. Thank you. Over to Aliya.
Yeah. Thank you, Shireen. Assalamu alaikum ji. It feels really great to be here at LLF today, and especially great because I'm here with these wonderful people. You just heard their wonderful stories. And as Shireen said, there's a coming of full circle here. And the way we are connected, you know, it seems to me that we've known each other for a lifetime. But actually, in reality, I just met Nayyar Saab and Shireen a month back, and Hazel only 4 days back. But it was the physical meeting was 4 days back, but the universe had been conspiring for quite long, and our paths intriguingly converged at 55 Lawrence Road. Although there were like mysterious and uncanny ways in which it did, What happened was that my quest of rediscovering Lahore, because I was writing a book, I am still writing a book about it, is actually a book about 6 Lahori women. And I was, although when I had a long list, I had men and women both, which I wanted to research. But after only a month of background work, it was just down to 6 women from Lahore. And it was then that I knew that I will not decide what to write about. I will just be held by the hand and taken along, and the project will have a force of its own. And that's what's happened. I've been meeting one after another, amazing, amazing, bewildering, stunning, perplexing, awesome, and awe-inspiring women, and all of them from Lahore. And this is a tribute to all of you ladies sitting here from Lahore. You are amazing, amazing. And I mean, any of you, I'm 100% confident that if I start talking to this one here, she will have an enormous story that we would all love to hear. So that's why I'm just restricting myself to 6 Lahori women right now, and researching their lives and digging up, information about them. Hazel, I just met her, I found her when I was doing my research, and it meant a great deal of reading about Lahore. And there was this article on on the net, and it just said Lahore, something like, Lahore felt closest to what home was. This was Hazel talking to some journalist on one of her visits, and the sentence just stayed with me, and I said, because Lahore always feels like home to me. I'm living in Islamabad, and Islamabad is great. I mean, I like it, but Lahore is something else. I dream about Lahore. I wish I was in Lahore whenever something is happening in Lahore. I feel like sitting in the Lawrence Garden whenever I see a tree. I feel like eating dahi bhallas from Regal whenever I'm taken to some pathetic chatkara thing. I don't know what they are, but they call them golgappas in Islamabad, but you know what it is. But I do like them too. But yes, I yearn for the Das kulcha from Androon, and the Chaman ice cream from Beedon Road. These are things no one can take anywhere away from Lahore. They are in Lahore, and you have to be in Lahore and be a Lahori to know what it is. And I exactly knew what Hazel was feeling when she was saying that sentence, that this was in the whole world, and she is a world citizen. She has never really made a home anywhere else. And this Lahore felt closest to what a home was. And she's never really had a home, she told me. She doesn't feel at home anywhere else. And this is what we are. This is what Lahore is. So basically, my quest of rediscovering Lahore brought me to all these ladies. And these ladies are, what makes them really unique is that they are real women. I'm not imagining them. And yet they feel like fantastical creatures from some mythical stories and legends. They are legends. This is a living legend sitting here before you. And she survived, and the way these women have, overcome their obstacles against all odds, and they have risen above the pitfalls, and they have not only risen, but they've risen and shone, and walked into the sunset with their heads held high. And it's not like they don't have wounds, but they don't show their wounds. They don't want to show their wounds. They want to show the strength that they have. And I think this is special about what the younger generation women should learn from them, the strength and the grace and the elegance with which these ladies carry themselves, and how they do not let anything else come into their way. They are really good, strong role models for all of you young girls out there.
I'm feeling very strong.
Yeah, you should. Yeah.
I can wish both the ladies that their books should come out.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll
Thank you so much. Thank you. I just want to say that I want my book to feel like somewhat like time travel. Each story being a time capsule, it carries the sounds and sights and feels of the city, a city gone by, a Lahore we really want to remember, the Lahore of Manto and Faiz and Amrita Shergill and Babsi Sidwa. Let's just revive that spirit of celebration, when we used to celebrate our diversity and ethnicity and gender. And let's all think in unison and proclaim that we are all Lahore. Thank you. We have some time for questions, so you can, yeah, please. Do we have a mic, please? Thank you.
I think it's a small room.
Yeah, it's okay. You can put your question. Yeah.
One additional information about Lahore. Perhaps Lahore is the only city in the world which has produced 6 Nobel laureates.
Wow.
Started from Kipling. I wrote about it, and
That's
just
good.
document.
That's good.
My question to you: my mother was a patient of Dr. Selzer, and she knew how to select the best doctors, and so Dr. Selzer was one of them. And I used to visit with my mother, and then suddenly he left. And I didn't know what were the reasons, but he did leave. I have a 2-part question. First question is, was there a desire by him to be buried in Lahore?
To what?
To be buried in Lahore by Dr. Selzer? And the second part of my question is, till today, you cannot travel to Israel on a Pakistani passport. How did you manage to do that?
Well, it's
She has a
secret.
British passport, she
I
said.
have a British
But the family, the
passport,
father had a Pakistani passport.
But I had a British passport full of Israeli stamps.
Your father had a Pakistani passport. You showed it there.
He had.
Yeah, but how
But-
did he manage to get into Israel on
He
a
also
Pakistani
had the
passport?
papers.
You know, he lived, they got the Palestinian passport, the Israeli passport, when they lived in Israel, when they moved to Israel. They had Pakistani passports before that.
No, my question is, you can't enter Israel on a Pakistani passport. None of us can.
If you're Jewish, you can.
Thank you for that question.
Did he ever?
I don't know how much time we
Did
have.
he desire to be buried in Lahore?
They never said that. But they never talked about being buried anywhere. But I have a British passport, and I'm full of Israelis. Well, I was visiting my parents till they died, but you can't get a Pakistani visa if you have Israeli stamps in your passport.
Hazel, we have another question, please.
So I had to get a second passport.
Yeah.
Hazel,
Yeah.
can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, I can see you now, too.
We have never met, but we've had a 3-hour telephone conversation. 3 years ago, when I called you from Washington, I traced you.
Oh, you are.
I am it.
Oh, my
I am
goodness.
it. 3 hours, you wouldn't let me go. We had a 3-hour conversation.
I know, if you just tell me.
Just to remind you, I was growing up on the other side of the hedge.
Oh,
How interesting.
At number 5 Racecourse Road.
yes, I do remember that
Two
conversation.
different streets, but
And
we
then-
were
then
we were immediate neighbors.
Okay.
And we
Yeah.
spoke,
Our football used to end up in your garden. Oh,
and we were very nice about returning it, right? But you never contacted me again.
No.
You were supposed to contact
yes,
me
I'm
again. You
supposed
never
to
did.
contact you. But that's because it's a long story, and I'll
You
tell
can
you
tell
it
us later on.
after the session.
So we'll have coffee and listen to that story afterwards.
I think they're going to cut us off.
I just have a quick question. What made your parents decide to come to India? Do you know?
Yes, everybody went to Palestine in those days, 1937. And the story is, they met a Monsignore from the Vatican who said to them, why would you go to Palestine? You're young, you're doctors, why go to Palestine? He said, go to India. They need European doctors there. So they went on a whim, literally like that. And so my father went first because my mother hadn't finished her studies yet. And then she came.
I think it was part of the story that wherever he went in India, they said, no, we have no room for you. Then somebody suggested that before you go back, because he was disheartened.
Well, he could
And-
never go back to Nazi Germany, but
No, not Nazi
Could have
Germany,
changed it.
but it could have changed the program.
You could have
But
changed
one
the
of the
program.
last stops that he,
I think we are reaching.
We
to
just
the-
have time for one short little question, and that will wrap it up. She already has a mic, sorry.
Do you speak Urdu?
so embarrassing, the kind of Urdu I speak. Shireen told me last year, she was very kind. She said, you speak colonial Urdu.
Can we hear it?
So that's the answer
as long
to
as
that.
you can communicate. Okay.
Thank you so much for your interest. You were a lovely audience. Thank you.